Okay, stop. Before you scroll past this, I need you to look at Antarctica. Go ahead, look at it. Ice, more ice, a little bit of rock, and then, surprise, more ice. It is the single most miserable place on Earth. No population, no warmth, no pizza delivery. The largest animal that lives there year-round on land is literally an insect. An insect, my friends, not a polar bear, not a wolf, a bug the size of your fingernail called the Antarctic midge, which, and I cannot stress this enough, is also the continent's largest land predator. Let that marinate. The most dangerous thing walking around Antarctica right now is a fly. But here's the thing. There was a time, not that long ago in geological terms, when Antarctica was not a frozen hellscape, when it wasn't white, when it wasn't barren, when you could have walked through it in shorts and been absolutely horrifyingly eaten alive. Because Antarctica was once a jungle. And not just any jungle. We're talking lush forests, rivers, swamps, massive dinosaurs, enormous sea monsters, and a sky filled with creatures the size of small planes. And by the end of this video, you are going to look at that frozen continent very, very differently. Let's go. First, let's appreciate just how extreme Antarctica is right now. Because context matters. Antarctica is bigger than Australia. It's bigger than Europe. It covers about 14 million square kilometers, which is a lot of square kilometers. Trust me on this one. It is officially the coldest continent on Earth, the driest, the windiest. The average temperature in the interior sits around minus 57 degrees Celsius in winter. That's not a typo. That is colder than Mars on a warm day. And as a result, 70% of all fresh water on Earth is locked up there in the form of ice. Some of that ice goes down over 4.8 kilometers deep. That's deeper than most of the ocean. Now here's what's wild. All of that ice, all of it, is relatively new. In the grand timeline of Earth, Antarctica only became this frozen nightmare about 34 million years ago, during a period called the Eocene-Oligocene transition. Before that, green, warm, alive. And we're going to go way further than 34 million years. Way further. We're going to go back to the time of the dinosaurs, back to when Antarctica wasn't just a jungle, it was one of the most interesting and terrifying places on the planet. Buckle up. To understand prehistoric Antarctica, you need to understand one word: Pangea. Back in the Jurassic period, we're talking roughly 200 million years ago, the continents as we know them didn't exist. Instead, there was one massive supercontinent called Pangea, and it was slowly, very slowly breaking apart, like a bad relationship that just couldn't hold it together. Antarctica at this point was still connected to a bunch of other land masses. It shared borders with Australia, India, and was part of the larger southern supercontinent called Gondwana. And crucially, it was not at the South Pole yet. It sat further north, more like where the southern tip of South America is today. And in the Mesozoic era, the entire planet was just warmer. Carbon dioxide levels were through the roof, which, yes, is bad for us, but it was fantastic for dinosaurs. So what did Jurassic Antarctica look like? Forests. Dense, lush, ancient forests. Not the kind with pretty flowers. We're talking ancient conifers, ferns, and a group of plants called bennetales that haven't existed for millions of years and honestly looked like something from a fever dream. Rivers, lakes, swamps, and streams cut through the landscape. It wasn't exotic, it was genuinely beautiful. And the best-studied fossil site from this period is a place called Hansen Hill, located on Mount Kirkpatrick. Today, it's buried under glaciers, but back then it had a climate similar to southern Chile. Average temperature around 17–18 degrees Celsius. Not tropical, but perfectly comfortable. And it had dinosaurs. The earliest Antarctic dinosaurs. The dinosaurs found here include ceratosaur-like animals, early ornithischians, and a whole bunch of massopods, which were among the earliest relatives of the sauropods. Now, when I say sauropods, your brain immediately goes to the long-necked giants, but these early guys, not yet. Many were bipedal, some were no bigger than a deer. But some were getting there. The Glacialosaurus, for example, was already pushing 6 meters, about 20 feet, and weighed about as much as an Asian elephant. So, still not Brachiosaurus, but not something you want to bump into on a morning hike either. What's genuinely fascinating is that at Hansen Hill, you had these primitive early sauropod relatives living right alongside already advanced true sauropods. It's like if you found Neanderthals hanging out with modern humans at a Starbucks, which actually might explain some things. But I digress. The king of Jurassic Antarctica, the Cryolosaurus, which translates, and this is real, to frozen crested lizard. Discovered in 1994, this thing was stomping around Antarctica about 194 million years ago, and it has a nickname. They call it Elvosaurus. Not because of its attitude, though let's be honest, it definitely had that, but because of the bizarre, elaborate crest on top of its skull that ran side to side and looked almost exactly like Elvis Presley's pompadour hairstyle. Scientists believe this crest was hollow and delicate, meaning it probably wasn't for fighting, it was for showing off, attracting mates, being fabulous, which I respect deeply. But don't let the fabulous hairdo fool you, because this thing was terrifying. It measured up to 7 meters long, that's 23 feet, and weighed somewhere between half a ton and 2/3 of a ton. It had powerful arms, curved claws, and inward-pointing teeth specifically designed to grip struggling prey and not let go. And here's the part that'll ruin your day. Multiple Cryolosaurus specimens were found with signs of cannibalism. They were eating each other. In at least one case, a juvenile had been feasting on a much larger adult. Baby food, I guess, is relative. What's also interesting about Jurassic Antarctica is that beneath all this life, there was serious geological chaos happening. The fossil formations show massive layers of volcanic material, evidence that devastating local eruptions were common. Pyroclastic flows, lava, wildfires, resources becoming scarce, which explains the cannibalism, honestly. So Jurassic Antarctica, not a paradise, but absolutely alive. As the Jurassic gave way to the Cretaceous, Gondwana continued its slow-motion collapse. India dramatically yeeted itself off the continent like someone rage-quitting a group project. Then Australia and Antarctica, in a bromance that honestly deserved its own documentary, stayed connected for tens of millions of years, sharing animals and ecosystems across their shared border. But even that ended. By the time we hit the late Cretaceous, about 85 million years ago, Antarctica was mostly alone. It had drifted further south. It was more isolated, but it was still connected to South America via occasional land bridges. And the climate had shifted. It became more humid, more seasonal, and slightly warmer on average than the Jurassic. The forests changed too. The ancient ferns and conifers were increasingly joined and eventually overtaken by angiosperms, flowering plants. The very first flowers were spreading across the continent. Scientists believe late Cretaceous Antarctica might have looked similar to temperate forests today. Think places where the genus Nothofagus or southern beech trees grows in abundance. Rainy, green, beautiful. Mean summer temperatures could reach 25 degrees Celsius, that's 77 Fahrenheit, comparable to modern-day Nairobi, Kenya. But there was a catch, a big one. When winter came in Antarctica, even back then, it was dark. Not just cold, dark. Scientists believe the continent experienced up to 4 months of perpetual darkness, no sun, Just stars, the moon, and the occasional glow of a volcano on the horizon, which sounds absolutely miserable. And yet, life not only survived, it thrived. This is the part where things get truly wild, because the late Cretaceous was without question Antarctica's golden age. Let's meet the residents. The armored tank, Antarctopelta. One of the most common dinosaurs of the time was the Antarctopelta, an ankylosaur about 4 to 6 meters long, roughly the weight of a female bison. Now, ankylosaurs are already impressive. They're basically living tanks covered in bony armor called osteoderms. But the Antarctopelta had a twist. It didn't have the classic club tail that most ankylosaurs had. Instead, the osteoderms at the end of its tail elongated and flattened into blades. Basically, it had a tail that functioned like a macuahital, the Aztec weapon, a wooden club lined with obsidian blades, which Spanish conquistadors reported was capable of decapitating a horse in a single swing. Now imagine that weapon being wielded by a bison-sized dinosaur. Yeah, not a great day to be on the receiving end of that. The terror, Imperobator antarcticus. But who was the Antarctopelta defending itself against? Allow me to introduce the Imperobator antarcticus. The name roughly translates to powerful warrior of Antarctica. And before you get too comfortable, this thing was fully feathered. On the surface, it looks like a big fluffy raptor, which sounds almost adorable. It is not adorable. The Imperobator was over 3 meters long and quite robust, making it one of the largest dromaeosaurids or raptor-like animals known to science. It had powerful arms, powerful legs, and a mouth full of long, curved, serrated teeth. And those large eyes? Remember the 4 months of perpetual darkness? Those eyes were adapted for hunting in the dark. So let me paint you a picture. You are in Antarctica. It is winter. The sun has not risen in weeks. It is pitch black, and somewhere out there in the darkness, a feathered 3-meter predator with eyes specifically evolved to hunt in the dark is looking for something to eat. Sleep well. The mystery predator. And here's the bonus nightmare. Paleontologists believe at least one other large carnivorous theropod also called Antarctica home. We don't know exactly what it was, we just have fragments. But based on those fragments, it stood roughly 2.4 meters tall, about 8 feet, and was likely a megaraptoran. Megaraptorans, if you haven't heard of them, are a group of theropods that used enormous hand claws to essentially impale and gut their prey, like shish kebab, but the shish kebab is another dinosaur. So Antarctica had at least 2 large predators, possibly 3, in perpetual winter darkness. Cool, 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 cool. The gentle-ish ones. Not everything was a nightmare. Antarctica also had ornithopods, plant-eating dinosaurs like Morosaurus and Trinisaura, various birds, early mammals scurrying around, multiple types of marine animals along the coasts. And this is exciting, recent discoveries suggest titanosaurs may have visited Antarctica too. Titanosaurs, the group of sauropods that include the largest land animals that have ever existed. The Patagotitan, the Argentinosaurus, animals that were longer than 3 school buses end to end. We only have incomplete vertebrae so far, so we can't be sure of the size. But a titanosaur in late Cretaceous Antarctica walking through a temperate forest? That's something. Okay. Everything above, on land, that was the calm part. The waters surrounding Cretaceous Antarctica were a different story entirely. And I say this not to be dramatic, but as a genuine scientific assessment, if you fell into those waters, you were not coming back out. The mosasaurs. At least 5 different species of mosasaurs patrolled Antarctic waters. For those unfamiliar, mosasaurs were massive marine reptiles. Essentially, imagine a Komodo dragon the size of a school bus that was also a world-class swimmer and deeply personally offended by the concept of you existing. One of the Antarctic species was Mosasaurus lacini, a 10-meter, 33-foot predator with a sharply pointed snout and unusual slender teeth. Scientists believe it used a form of ratchet feeding, biting prey, holding it, and then using a flexible lower jaw to slowly, agonizingly walk the victim down its throat like a horrific conveyor belt. I'm going to let you sit with that image for a second. Then there was the Plioplatycarpus, smaller at about 6 meters, but more alarming in some ways because it had giant eyes adapted for the deep, dark ocean, and crucially, specimens of this thing have been found in prehistoric riverbeds, meaning it likely went into fresh water. Meaning even inland in Antarctica, you were not safe from a mosasaur. And then the Taniwasasaurus, an 8-meter generalist hunter, plus at least one unidentified species. 5 mosasaurs in one ocean. The plesiosaurs. But the mosasaurs weren't alone. They shared the waters with plesiosaurs, multiple families of them. Most were specialists, using their long necks to sneak into schools of fish and essentially vacuum them up. Less scary? Sure, until you remember they were still enormous marine reptiles. The sharks. Now, the fish. The star of the show here is the Cretolamna, a shark that was likely an ancestor of the megalodon. In Cretaceous Antarctica, adults reached about 5 meters, similar to a large tiger shark. It had rows of razor-like teeth and an opportunistic diet. We know this because it left bite marks on everything. Bony fish, turtles, squid, other sharks, and yes, elasmosaurs and mosasaurs. The largest confirmed prey item was over 9 meters long. Sharks have always been, and I quote directly from my research here, absolutely unhinged. But the Cretolamna wasn't alone. There were also angel sharks, dogfish sharks, cow sharks, frilled sharks, which still exist today and look like someone designed a nightmare with a pencil, and goblin sharks. But the goblin shark of the Cretaceous, the Scaponarhynchus, was something else entirely. Modern goblin sharks are sluggish deep-sea animals. Scaponarhynchus broke all the rules. It was a shallow water species, highly active, and could reach 6.7 meters, 22 feet in length. It weighed over a ton. And like the mosasaur, remains of it have been found in freshwater deposits. So yes, there was a 22-foot goblin shark that may have gone into rivers. You're welcome for that information. The predasaur. Finally, the sky. In 2019, a single metacarpal bone was found on James Ross Island. Based on its size, the animal it came from had a wingspan of over 5 meters, longer than the tallest African elephant is tall. We don't know exactly what species it was, but if it followed the patterns of its relatives, it was likely an Asdarchid, the group of pterosaurs that were enormous, terrifying, and quite possibly hunted on land as well as sea. So the largest thing to ever fly over Antarctica was a creature we haven't even fully identified yet, because of course it was. And then it ended. 66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly 10 kilometers wide slammed into what is now Mexico. And you might think, well, Antarctica is about as far from Mexico as you can possibly get on this planet. Surely it was somewhat protected. Nope. A study analyzing over 6,000 marine fossils from Antarctica, ranging from 70 million years old to 1 million years after the impact, found that approximately 70% of species disappeared right at the extinction boundary, same as everywhere else on Earth. On the day of the impact, Antarctica would have experienced magnitude 4 earthquakes, a cloud of ejecta, a superheated atmosphere which ignited anything caught in the open, and a tsunami roughly 10 meters tall, comparable to the waves that devastated Japan in 2011. And then the dust blocked the sun. Nuclear winter. The end of the non-avian dinosaurs, the end of the mosasaurs and most of the plesiosaurs, the end of Antarctica's golden age. Some things survived. The Credolamna hung around, and over tens of millions of years would eventually give rise to the megalodon. Some of the chimeras, the ghost sharks, made it through. But the Antarctica that had existed, the warm, green, terrifying, magnificent Antarctica, was gone. And 34 million years later, the ice came. And now the most dangerous thing there is a fly. So the next time someone shows you a picture of Antarctica and says there's nothing there, you know the truth. That frozen desert used to be a warm forest stocked by feathered hunters in perpetual darkness. Its seas were ruled by giant ratchet-feeding mosasaurs and 22-foot freshwater goblin sharks. Its skies were crossed by pterosaurs with wingspans longer than elephants are tall. Antarctica wasn't always nothing. Once upon a time, it was one of the most alive places on Earth. And honestly, maybe it's better that we live in the version where the scariest thing there is a bug. If you want to see what happened after the extinction, how Antarctica eventually became what it is today, and what insane creatures filled the gap, I've got you covered. Check out my other video linked right here. And if you're new here, hi, welcome. Please subscribe because we do this kind of thing all the time. And I promise you, you are not prepared for what's coming next. Thanks for watching. Until next time.